Hi, how you doing? Today I thought I'd bring you along as I go over all the annuals that I planted throughout the year and make some decisions on what are clearly winners and clearly losers. My name is Sharon and I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. A clear winner for me this year actually surprised me. I did not think that it was going to perform as well as it did, especially when we had that rainy and kind of cold month of June, lots of wind, and then the extreme heat of July, and now here we are back into kind of cooler temperatures. They're leveling off some, but anyways, the one that I really did like was the ivy leaf geranium. Both this one and another I'll show you in a minute. This one is called Merlot, and the habit of it, the absolute amount of blooms that it has kept on pushing all season long has been great. Now I've overwintered the ivy leaf geraniums in my basement under grow lights. I have two mother plants, and those are just the plants that I take cuttings from. And I do have the mother plants hanging over by the greenhouse. We'll get a look at them in a minute. These are cuttings and that I took in about maybe February or March. They actually were very easy to root from cuttings, and then I just continued to grow them under the lights in the basement, which were easy. They did not put on a whole lot of growth at the time. Even when I moved them into the greenhouse, they didn't grow gangbusters until I actually got them out here and planted them in here. And you know, as I said, they just keep pushing out the blooms, and they didn't care about the weather. This combination is repeated 3 times down the driveway, and what makes it challenging is that this pot is in full sun all day long, and the second one gets some shade. As you can see, it's already in shade and it's not quite noon, and the third one is in a fair amount of shade, and the ivy leaf geranium just continued to push out the blossoms regardless of the amount of light that it was getting. So that was impressive, and that is something that I will, I'm sure, continue to repeat, especially in this top pot. It is a rather shallow pot. It's not very deep. I'm going to say it's probably maybe the equivalent of an 8-inch, 10-inch pot on top. But as I said, it is not very deep, maybe at the very most 6 inches deep, I think. So clearly they don't need a lot of root space. They're not really aggressive in their root zone. And as I said, just keep pushing out the flowers. I think I gave them a water-soluble feed perhaps twice. I want to say it was once in June and once in July, and I have not fed them since. They did get a slow-release fertilizer kind of mixed in with the soil when I planted. But other than that, very easy care. They actually prefer to be dried out. Geraniums in general prefer to be dried out some. And so watering, daily watering is certainly not an issue. These probably get watered more like every 4 or 5 days. The only thing that is required with ivy leaf geraniums or geraniums of any kind is that they are not self-cleaning. Although I have to say that the spent blossoms on these plants aren't really noticeable. Perhaps if you had a lot of them, but generally about once a week, maybe not even, I just go through and pick them off. So for me, in my opinion, this is one of the best annuals that I've actually ever grown, and I've really been very happy with the performance of it. And so I'm just going to take the camera and go handheld for a few more, and just to show you a little bit closer. And we're also going to talk about the petunias that are down on the bottom. And so there is the color of the Merlot. It's kind of a frilly, almost doubly sort of look, although it isn't. But it isn't just a solitary kind of plain look either. It's very pretty. Now I had it paired with this Crazy Tunia Cosmic Purple, and it doesn't look too bad in this pot, but I find that in the other 2 pots they are really lacking, and these are definitely full sun only type of petunias. This one is also a Crazy Tunia, and it's called Rose Gold. And I think that it does make a really nice pairing with that geranium. I think that's really pretty. It does show up nicely. And here in the middle pot, you can see that the blooms of the ivy leaf geranium are, still so many blooms and still pushing lots of blooms. And down here in the lower pot, the rose gold is growing very well, but the cosmic purple did almost nothing. And as a matter of fact, just over on the other side, there should be 3 in here, but they have almost all but disappeared. And here in the third pot on the driveway, you can see that the ivy leaf is still pushing beautiful blossoms. And so this is another variety. I do have another mother plant of this, and I did think that the two would look nice together. Now, the other 2 pots ended up being all Merlot. They weren't blooming when I planted them, and I didn't have them marked which was which. I didn't think it would matter, but in the future I think that I will pay more attention to that, so I do get that mix. And again, down here, the rose gold is blooming quite nicely. These have developed kind of a little bit more of a yellow streak in them than some of the others do. And so here the cosmic purple is doing something, but certainly not to the extent that the rose gold is. And there's 3 plants of each planted into this bottom container. And in these top containers, I did plant just the ivy leaf geraniums, but I also use them as accents throughout some of the other containers, which you'll see as we go along. This combination is also a clear winner for me, as well as just the plants themselves. They are performing beautifully. The grass in it is proven winner graceful grass, purple fountain grass. And what I love about this particular plant is the seed heads and how they just kind of sway in the breeze. We have a windy yard. There's always seems to be about a breeze about, and so they just look really, really pretty. I really like this. It's paired with the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry, which is a beautiful plant. I think that there is only one jazzberry in there, so it is a very good plant to fill up space. And then at the very bottom is wire vine. And that wire vine, I had wintered a pot of wire vine in the house and then took some cuttings from it. So I did have quite a bit of it to use here and there. I do like it as an accent plant. It's not overwhelming. It provides just a bit of green, trailing green look. And in some of the containers, it kind of sticks out here and there as well, not necessarily all just hanging. And so I have actually 2 of these planted, one on either side of the garage. And here is the problem with the second one. The petunia, the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry, is doing wonderfully, as is the wire vine. But as you can see, the purple fountain grass does not want to bloom. And I'm not sure the reason for that. They get almost equal amounts of sun. This one gets perhaps 1 hour less of sunshine through the day, but this garage faces south, so really they get several hours, probably upwards of at least 10 hours of really strong sunlight all the time. Now I do see that it is starting to push some blossoms, and I hope that they are now spurred on and will start to push them up and have them, as tall as the other ones. These ones so far are quite short. So I don't know the reason for that. I did some research on that, why it would fail to bloom, and it could have something to do with not liking fertilizer. I probably did fertilize the pot, but I guess it likes quite a lean soil. That would be the only reason. It's not for lack of light nor lack of moisture or anything like that. Or perhaps it's just a dud. So it kind of does irritate me a little, because when I plant things to look symmetrical on both sides and then one doesn't turn out that way, it kind of does bug me a bit. In between the 2 garage doors, I planted another pot with the Supertunia Mini Vista Indigo. I really like this plant because of the color change that it goes through that makes it look like you have 3 or 4 different colors of petunia in there. It starts as a very, very dark purple and then it fades to almost like a lavender color with a little bit of veining, and I think that's just beautiful. The plant that's in behind is lemon cypress, and that was the plant that I rescued from a holiday planter back in the winter. I have a video on that where I potted it up. It actually makes quite a beautiful houseplant, and when the time comes I will be repotting it into a pot to bring into the house again for the winter. And again, at the bottom I have wire vine. That is also a Proven Winners plant. It's called Proven Accents Big Leaf Wire Vine, which is Muhlenbeckia complexa. And here you can see the nice variation of color in the indigo. And now hanging just above the indigo is kind of a mixed up pot. Now this was an attempt at purple bellvine, which I will get into more in a minute. I have some of the ivy leaf geraniums thrown in here, right there and here you can see them, as well as this hot pink little petunia looking flower is a petcoa. It's called In Viva Pink, and it's a nice bright pink. I do like it. Has a yellow throat. It's quite pretty. Now this was, as I said, an attempt at purple bellvine. The pot was initially going to be just purple bellvine, but then I saw that it really wasn't going to have the vigor to just have that in the pot. So then I added more things on top later. The purple bellvine I grew from seed. I started the seed in January under lights. It grew well in the house. It was then transferred to the greenhouse. It grew fairly well in the greenhouse, but then I did discover that it really doesn't like harsh sun. And in this location in particular, it is struggling to some degree. I'm going to show you a couple other pots where they are doing better. Now I think that it's doing a little better now that our sun is not as intense now in, going on into mid-August almost. And so it is pushing a bunch of new growth and new blossoms, but it is not putting on a big show. And so in this case, I'm going to say that the purple bellvine in full sun, in full hot sun, is not a winner. The petcoa is definitely a winner. I really do like that plant. I thought it performed beautifully, and it really did tolerate the heat really, really well, as did the Supertunia mini vistas. They tolerated the heat really, really well, and so did the purple fountain grass, with the exception of the one that won't bloom, and that has nothing to do with the amount of heat that it's getting. So the In Viva Pink, definitely a winner. And here you can see the few ivy leaf geraniums that I've put in as accents. Here is the mother plant of the one ivy leaf geranium. This is Burgundy Blaze. And it does also have some variation in color. Some of them get a little darker, and most of them are that kind of striping right there. Full of blossoms. This is one mother plant, and just, really, really floriferous. It just really pushes out the blossoms. And here's the mother plant of the Merlot. It does have some kind of straggly stems down here that have a little bit of bareness right there. And when I bring them in for the winter, that will all get trimmed back, and then, all of that could be used for cuttings, really. And of those two mother plants, my notes tell me that I had 42 cuttings that I've, placed here and there in some pots. I just, at some point I just started kind of sticking them in here and there because I did have a lot extra. But as it turned out, I'm glad I had them because I really, really do love them. Now we're just going to talk about this planting that I have over here. And this large container has 4 dipladenia in there. Now I bought these dipladenia last year on clearance for next to nothing, and they were quite small plants, which I then overwintered. There's 2 of these pink colored ones and 2 of the white. I also added in a bunch of the ivy leaf geranium and wire vine at the bottom. And so those dipladenia have grown really well. Now they don't vine as much as a mandevilla would. It's kind of in the same family as mandevilla, although the Diplodenia are not supposed to vine as strongly, and they certainly didn't. It has grown a lot in this container throughout the summer, and it quite enjoys this location. This front of the greenhouse just faces southeast, and so it does get late day shade. Another clear winner for me, which I would gladly grow again, is this plant. It is a Calibrachoa, and it's called Double Grapefruit. It's Proven Winners Super Bell's Magic Double Grapefruit. And I really, really do love it. I love the habit of it. Didn't ever look ratty at all throughout the entire season. And there it is from the other side with more sun on it. You can see the variation in color. And I have it paired with the antique Rosalie salmon, which in retrospect, I'm not sure that I would do again. First of all, the Calibrachoa has all but covered up the geranium. They turned out to be sort of the same height. Antique Rosalie salmon is not a tall geranium, and I think that it is probably best as a standalone, or, you know, perhaps with something dainty and white. Not with a Calibrachoa like this that is, I'm not going to say aggressive, but it certainly puts on lots and lots of growth. And the other plant that I have this double grapefruit Calibrachoa paired with is another Calibrachoa, which is called Leah Bubblegum. And Mr. B is getting busy. You know, it's fine. It did really struggle early in the season. It's now starting to look a little bit more decent, but the double grapefruit, I have 3 planted in this container, as well as 3 of the Leah Bubblegum and the double grapefruit. I mean, those Proven Winner plants, really, you just can't beat the vigor. So in this pot, the double grapefruit Calibrachoa is definitely a winner. I would not buy the Leah Bubblegum again, and although I love the antique Rosalie salmon geranium, I wouldn't put it in a mixed planting like this again, unless it was something, you know, that was far daintier. This container turned out okay. I like the pairing. It is Mrs. Pollock geranium, the variegated leaf geranium on top, with Proven Winners Supertunia Mini Vista Scarlet as the petunia. I think there's 3 in this container, which is probably an 18-inch container on the top. I'm going to say it's quite large, so this did fill it very nicely. And also in there is some shamrock oxalis, which did provide nice contrast earlier in the season. I think now they get a little lost in there. I don't know that that is necessarily the plant to go with something as aggressive as Supertunia, any of the vistas or mini vistas. But I think overall the Supertunia Mini Vista, or the Vistas, which I've grown before, I think this year they're all Mini Vista, but I think that regardless of the color, they're all clearly winners. The amount of flowers and the vigor that you get, and the fact that they are self-cleaning and you don't have to pick off blossoms. But I think overall, if you like petunias, I don't think you could ever go wrong with any of the Supertunia Mini Vista, or Vistas for that matter. I think they all perform just beautifully. This container I'm going to call a leftover container, and a new acquisition, because that's basically what it is. Some of the leftover ivy leaf geraniums. That's a Zonals geranium, and this is a new ivy leaf geranium that I picked up. This one is called Cascade Violet. And that is a Calliope geranium. It has a fluffier flower. Again, Calliope geraniums are a cross between a zonal leaf and an ivy leaf, and so their leaf is a little bit different. It's not that waxy feel like you find on the other type of ivy leaf geraniums. And here in the gravel garden, I have 2 pots that are planted pretty much identical. Again, these were pots that were going to be purple bellvine pots, and when I saw how they were progressing, I decided to put something else in it. And so I chose the Strawberry Punch Calibrachoa. I planted 1 just on the top, and then I had a whole bunch of seed grown ivy leaf geraniums, and so They were very small at the time. They needed somewhere to grow for the summer. And so I put them in here, and they're actually turning out to be pretty good little geraniums. They don't have the same kind of vigor as the other ones that I have. The flower type is more of a single petal, not so big and fluffy looking or almost double looking as all the other ones that I have. But you know, they do make a nice accent. They are worth growing and probably worth saving. I'm sure that I will. When I take this apart, I'm sure that I will be keeping the ivy leaf geraniums. And so I'm just going to bring you in a little closer just to show you what is going on with the purple bellvine in these two locations. And from the top of the container, you certainly cannot see any of the purple bellvine at all. There's that strawberry punch calibrachoa. It's nice. I do like it. And then all of this waxy leaf, there's actually a lot of growth of the ivy leaf geranium. But you can see the single petals there, completely different than the other ones. And then trailing below is the purple bellvine. Here you can see what the purple bellvine is doing. Now it probably would look nicer hanging far higher or planted in the container below. My original intent was to plant them in this lower container and then train them to travel up the arbor that I have here. And perhaps if I grew them again, that is what I would do. I'm just going to also mention here that on the shadier side, where it gets more shelter from the direct sun, there is more blossoms. And so it is a plant, even in our colder zone, that is going to appreciate shade, midday shade. And here is the hanging pot on the other side, and here is the purple bellvine. Now it does start off as the bract plus the little flower. Where are we here? There we go. That is actually the flower right there. It's kind of a little tubular flower. That falls off and this bract stays. I don't know when those bracts actually fall off. I feel like they probably do, but there is that sort of extension of color. But overall, if this is a winner, I'm not going to say it is. I'm also not going to say it's a loser. That is the purple bellvine. I think it was a really good trial. And I think that if I were to grow it again, I would grow it differently. I think I would grow it in a pot and then have it trail up. And I probably would choose this location because it does get a little bit of afternoon shade, which apparently this plant really appreciates. I would not grow it again as a hanging plant, even as an accent plant. I don't think it really adds enough, to be honest. And the flower color is not vibrant. So you have to be fairly close up to actually see what's going on. So if you're looking for impact from further away, definitely, like I'm looking at the In Viva Pink right now, and the jazzberry, you know, from a distance, those really draw your eye. And so I guess it depends on what you want. I wanted the challenge of growing purple bellvine. I definitely got that. I know how it grows now. I know how it reacts in our climate. And it didn't really appreciate June very much. It didn't appreciate the cold. It does like the heat, but at the same time, it doesn't like full sun. So, and as well, it does take a long time for it to get to this point. And two pots that I now have here in the gravel garden. These were growing on the back deck. I thought that perhaps they were becoming a little bit too shaded. We have a couple of trees that sort of overhang the deck, and they provide a little bit more shade than I thought that they actually did. So this grass is a very big grass, and it's very thirsty grass, and it is also a proven winter grass from the graceful grasses line, and it is called Vertigo. Now it is just taking on the purple coloring in the leaves, which was actually, to be honest, the reason that I bought it, because I thought it was going to be a fairly dark purple leaf plant. I'm thinking that it did not take on that coloring just yet. First of all, maybe it needs to be mature. Second of all, I'm not sure that it was getting the amount of sun that it needed on the deck. And it has definitely purpled up since I've brought it out here into the gravel garden. I have two pots of these, and I have them paired with the Supertunia Mini Vista Yellow. Now I wanted a brighter yellow petunia, and so although this is performing just like a Mini Vista should, it is a little bit too pale for my liking. I did want more of a bright lemon yellow type of petunia, and so I think that I will have to continue my search for that. This vertigo grass is also supposed to send up some bloom stalks. You know, it's already August. I don't see any sign of that whatsoever just yet, so I don't know if our season is long enough for that to happen. But as I said, it's a very thirsty grass. I've been watering this a lot, and you know, it needs water again today. I do like the habit of it, though. I do like the way it kind of loosely falls over without it looking floppy. When you water it, even if you water it a lot, it doesn't stand up straight, really straight. It still has that kind of graceful grasses, I guess. It still has that kind of graceful look. And so win and loss, I'm going to say the grass is a win, pretty much. It did grow much bigger than I thought it was going to. It's a fairly aggressive grass. I'm curious what it would be like in the landscape, like in the ground where it has no pot restriction. This is, again, a very large pot. So the petunias are neither a win or a loss. They're a win for habit, but a loss for the color, just because that's not the color I wanted. And here is the other vertigo grass in the other container. This one is in more of a shady position. Here, even here in the gravel garden, there's a fairly substantial hedge just to my right that provides shade from early afternoon on. There's also a big tree just to the southwest of me, and the sun is going behind that tree. So I could move this over just slightly to get it into more of a sunny position. Perhaps I'll do that. But this plant is definitely greener than the other plant, which, you know, has far more purple tones in it. And so would I grow this grass again? Definitely I would. But I would grow it knowing what I know now, that it needs, you know, complete full sun all day long, and that it needs a lot of water, and that the roots need a lot of space. It would probably look amazing grown in the ground, or in its own big container. I think it would look very nice in that way as well. And never disappointing are the zonal geraniums. And I didn't want to plant them directly into the soil because I wanted to control the watering and fertilizing. So I actually just left them in their pots, and I dug a hole in the planting bed, and I just put them pot and all into the bed, and that has worked very well. I'm able to control the watering because, you know, geraniums like to get dried out just a little bit more, and I have this on a drip watering system to water everything else that is in the bed. So I think I have maybe 6 pots of the mother plant geraniums, and you know, they're really pushing out the blooms. I know the pots are absolutely full of roots because they are poking out the bottom as well through the drip holes at the bottom. I will be repotting these, of course, before I bring them in, cutting everything back and repotting them again, putting them into fresh soil, and, you know, cleaning up the pots. That does make a little bit of a mess, but these are just nursery pots. They're nothing special. I'll just bring you in closer. I also have Dusty Miller back here, as well as a few of those zinnias that I planted. Geraniums along here also include some of the cuttings that I had. They're not all potted. There are some cuttings. And first of all, here is the new look Dusty Miller. I don't recall exactly how many plants I had, but I did plant them kind of as a background in here. A little bit short this year. They have grown taller in the past, and I don't know the reason for that. Maybe they grew taller before because I had them more crowded, and this year I didn't crowd them as much. And so there aren't as many plants. They have room to grow. I landed up with very few zinnias. I think I had my packages, I only had 10 seed in each package. They were small packages. This is the double Zahara cherry, I believe it is. And they've been blooming nicely for some time. I think I landed up with 3 plants that that germinated. I did not have really good indoor germination on those. And the other one I had was I think it was Starlight Rose, something like that. I'm not particularly fond of that plant. I thought this pink veining would be a lot more pronounced, and it doesn't seem to be as pronounced as I thought it would be. The flower is also a lot smaller than I thought it would be. But this double Sahara cherry is a pretty nice flower. Again, it's not a huge flower, but the plant itself is not huge. But truthfully, when you are competing with something like this is one of the mother plant geraniums. I mean, it's absolutely covered in that bright blossom. That one as well, absolutely covered. And so if that's what you're going for, which is what I go for, what I try to go for in this bed in particular, you know, the geranium is certainly a winner. And here's a couple more pots of a mix of zonal as well as ivy leaf geranium. And then up on the deck are my disappointing portulaca. I've moved them there only, you know, because I just don't see them as much back here, or I don't pay attention to them as much back here. But you can see how disappointing the portulaca are. You know, it's like they gave up, and they just aren't really doing anything. They've just, as I said, they've kind of given up. Whereas the Mrs. Pollock geranium in both of the pots, there's the other one there, you know, they're looking fabulous, really. But the portulaca, which were seed grown, they're a loss for me. They're a big loss for me. So I've talked about a lot of winners. I haven't talked about the losers very much. The winners, again, the ivy leaf geraniums were beautiful. The zinnias, I didn't get many, but you know, what I have are nice. The New Look Dusty Miller never actually fails to perform. That's, I think, the third year now that I've been growing them. I really do like that New Look Dusty Miller. I like the other Dusty Miller as well, but I like just the leaf structure of the New Look. The fountain grass and the vertigo grass, you know, I really do like them. The Supertunia Mini Vista Jazzberry, the Indigo, in particular the Indigo, I just really like that. Different colors in the same plant. I think that's beautiful. The Vista Scarlet, good if you like red. You know, maybe I'm not a big fan of red, but it did go nicely with that geranium that has, with the Mrs. Pollock geranium that has an orange flower, so that's a little bit difficult to pair something with it. The Patcoa and Viva Pink that's hanging above the garage, you know, I love that. It has such a vibrant color. I think you could see it from a mile away. If that were paired with that sunshine yellow, that would be spectacular if I could find that sunshine yellow that I want. The Calibrachoa double grapefruit, beautiful plant, great all around. There was nothing about that plant that I did not like. I think I mentioned last year that I may actually like the Proven Winner line in particular of Calibrachoa more than I like petunias, but that Mini Vista line is nice as well. I like the size of the flower and how floriferous it is, how many flowers that plant pushes. All of the Vista series, I think, are like that. So those were the winners. For the meh, I have a third category, and that's the meh, and that was the Acerina. I mean, they just didn't do anything. They're planted, they're alive, and they're just not really doing much at all. The Portulaca, big disappointment. After the first flush of blooms, they kind of got a little lanky. I cut them back, and now they have just done nothing. So they're on the deck, and I think that really the plants should just be pulled at this point and maybe everything cleaned up, because there's nothing there that is particularly eye-catching. You know, the Bidens or Bidens, they're okay. They were really nice in the greenhouse. I absolutely love them in the greenhouse. But after they got planted out, I really wasn't all that fond of them. And the Mini Vista Yellow, I have it as a meh, only because I just didn't like the color. And then I have losses, and I really have nothing to show you for the losses. First of all, I sowed cardoon. I sowed it in the house under grow lights. I gave them a month and nothing germinated. I can't remember how many seed were in the package, maybe 15, I just don't recall. It was not a lot of seed. They're a big seed, fairly hard seed coat. I don't know if I would try them again. I did want them as a bold kind of statement plant, and yeah, just nothing germinated. Another thing that did not germinate for me was the direct sown poppies, not a one. Now, if they were going to germinate, I thought they would have germinated fairly early, toward the end of May, and certainly into June, when we had a fair amount of rain and drizzles of rain and showers, passing showers, and every plant absolutely loved that. Everything else was germinating, but the poppies were not. And I do wonder if they did germinate earlier, and I didn't see that. And then we had that extreme heat for maybe about a week at the end of May, when it got to 35, 37 degrees, which is well into the upper 90s in the Fahrenheit range. And I wonder if they did start to germinate and then dried up, or start to germinate and burned off, that I just didn't see it. That could very well have been. The bachelor buttons that I sowed at the same time, a few of those did germinate. They germinated later into June is when I did see those germinating, and they're blooming now, but I'm actually beginning to work on developing the extension to the rock garden there, and so there is not a whole lot to look at there aside from mess and under construction. And I've also noted the Crazy Tunia Cosmic Purple as a loss. I mean, it could maybe go into the meh category, but I'm going to say it's a loss. They just don't have the vigor, even compared to the Crazy Tunia Rose Gold. They do not have the same vigor, and yeah, I'm just not fond of them. And again, I really like them in the greenhouse. I love the look of them on the bench. I thought they looked magnificent. If they had a better growth habit, the same as the Rose Gold, I think I probably would like them better, but they also didn't intermingle quite the way I wanted them to. So those are my wins and losses, and how I will learn from this going forward. For next year, I'm going to pay more attention. Plants are getting a lot more expensive. You have to pay more attention. You want that vigor, and you want that plant to perform. And in particular, in our short season, you really want that plant to perform. But clearly the biggest winner this year is this little Rudbeckia that seated himself in the paving stones, has never gotten a drop of extra water other than rain, has never been fertilized. The only thing that has happened was that I was cautious that I just didn't step on it, but something like this just always never ceases to amaze me, how we take so much care in trying to grow flowers, and then this happens with absolutely no help from the gardener whatsoever. So not an annual, but the summer sun heliopsis are having their moment, so I thought I'd end off here. Hey, thanks very much for hanging out with me today. I do appreciate you taking the time to do so. And I hope you found it enjoyable or informative in some way, or helpful, and if you did, give me a thumbs up. Maybe a hype, tell your friends, and if you have not yet subscribed, I'd love for you to do that too. I hope you're doing well. See you soon.